Breaking free from people-pleasing. Stop living for others. Start living for yourself. Written and published by Rising Audiobook. Introduction. Have you ever said yes when every part of you wanted to say no? Have you ever smiled to keep the peace, stayed silent to avoid conflict, or abandoned your own needs just to make someone else comfortable? If so, you already know what people-pleasing feels like. It does not arrive like a storm. It slips into your life quietly, wearing the mask of kindness, politeness, and being a good person. But behind that mask is exhaustion. Behind that smile is fear. Behind every forced yes is a small betrayal of yourself. People-pleasing can make you feel loved, needed, and accepted for a moment. But over time it takes something much deeper. It steals your voice. It drains your energy. It teaches you to measure your worth by other people's approval instead of your own truth. This audiobook is not about becoming cold, selfish, or careless. It is about becoming free, free from guilt, free from approval addiction, free from the pressure to be everything for everyone. Because the truth is, a life built on pleasing others is a life slowly disappearing. By the end of this journey, you will understand why you keep losing yourself, why saying no feels so hard, and how to return to the person you were before the world taught you to forget yourself. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Hidden Life of a People-Pleaser. Imagine waking up every day with an invisible question running through your mind. What do other people expect from me? Before making a decision, you think about how someone else might react. Before expressing an opinion, you wonder whether people will approve. Before saying no, you worry about disappointing someone. If this sounds familiar, you may be living the hidden life of a people-pleaser. People-pleasing is one of the most misunderstood habits in the world. At first glance, it looks like kindness. People-pleasers are often described as generous, dependable, thoughtful, and easy to get along with. They volunteer to help, avoid arguments, and rarely complain. Friends admire them, co-workers rely on them, and family members know they can always count on them. But beneath this admirable image lies a painful truth. Genuine kindness comes from choice. People-pleasing comes from fear. There is a profound difference between helping because you want to and helping because you're afraid of what might happen if you don't. A kind person can say yes with joy and no without guilt. A people-pleaser often says yes while silently wishing they had the courage to refuse. That difference changes everything. People-pleasing isn't simply about being nice. It's about placing other people's comfort above your own well-being so consistently that you begin to disappear from your own life. Your decisions stop reflecting your values and start reflecting everyone else's expectations. Many people don't even realize they're trapped in this pattern because it develops so gradually. You tell yourself you're just being considerate. You don't want to create conflict. You don't want anyone to think you're selfish. You want everyone to feel comfortable around you. Slowly, those small choices become a way of life. You answer messages immediately, even when you're exhausted. You accept invitations when you desperately need rest. You apologize for things that aren't your fault. You laugh at jokes you don't find funny. You agree with opinions you don't actually believe. You constantly put yourself last, convincing yourself that everyone else's needs matter more. From the outside, everything seems fine. Inside, however, something very different is happening. Every time you ignore your own feelings, a quiet frustration begins to grow. Every unnecessary yes becomes another promise you never wanted to make. Every unspoken opinion creates distance between who you truly are and the person the world sees. Eventually, that distance becomes exhausting. Many people-pleasers describe feeling emotionally drained without understanding why. They spend so much energy managing other people's emotions that they have little left for themselves. They worry constantly about whether someone is upset, disappointed, or offended. Even after conversations end, their minds replay every word, searching for mistakes they may have made. This constant emotional monitoring is incredibly expensive. It consumes your attention, steals your peace, and leaves you feeling anxious even during moments that should feel relaxing. Another hidden cost is resentment. Ironically, people pleasers often become resentful toward the very people they're trying to satisfy, not because those people necessarily demanded too much, but because the people pleaser never communicated their limits in the first place. They give beyond their capacity, expecting others to notice their sacrifice. When that recognition doesn't come, frustration quietly builds. Resentment is often the voice of ignored boundaries. One of the greatest tragedies of people-pleasing is the loss of identity. After years of adapting to everyone else's expectations, many people struggle to answer simple questions. What do I actually enjoy? What do I believe? What kind of life do I truly want? These questions become surprisingly difficult because so much of life has been spent reacting instead of choosing. Living this way can also create anxiety. When your happiness depends on keeping everyone else satisfied, life becomes unpredictable. You cannot control other people's opinions, moods, or expectations. No matter how hard you try, someone will eventually disagree with you, misunderstand you, or become disappointed. That reality feels terrifying to a people pleaser because approval has become their measure of safety. The truth is, no one can earn universal approval. Every successful leader, respected teacher, loving parent, and compassionate friend has disappointed someone. Disappointment is not proof that you failed. It is proof that you are human. Recognizing people-pleasing is not about criticizing yourself. In fact, many people-pleasers possess beautiful qualities. They are compassionate, empathetic, generous, and deeply caring. These strengths are not the problem. The problem begins when compassion for others is built upon the neglect of yourself. You deserve the same kindness you so freely give to everyone else. This chapter is not asking you to stop being caring. It is inviting you to examine the motivation behind your actions. Are you helping because your heart chooses to, or because your fear demands it? Are you being kind, or are you trying to earn acceptance? That single question has the power to transform your life. The journey toward freedom begins with awareness. Before you can change a lifelong habit, you must first see it clearly. Once you recognize the invisible patterns controlling your decisions, they begin to lose their power. And when they lose their power, you finally create space for something stronger than approval, the quiet confidence to live as your authentic self. Chapter 2. Why you need everyone to like you. No one is born a people pleaser. Think about a young child. They speak their mind without hesitation. They cry when they're upset, laugh when they're happy, and ask for what they want without feeling guilty. They don't worry about appearing selfish or offending someone. They simply express themselves honestly. So what changes? Somewhere along the journey of growing up, many people learn a dangerous lesson. If I want to be loved, accepted, or safe, I have to make other people happy. That lesson rarely arrives all at once. It forms quietly through repeated experiences, shaping the way we see ourselves and the world. For some, it begins in childhood. Perhaps love and praise came only when you behaved perfectly. Maybe you were called the good child because you never caused problems. You learned that being quiet, obedient, and helpful earned smiles and affection, while expressing anger, disagreement, or sadness brought criticism or disappointment. Without realizing it, your brain connected acceptance with performance. For others, home may have been unpredictable. A parent might have been emotionally distant, highly critical, or difficult to please. You discovered that keeping the peace felt safer than expressing your own needs. You became skilled at reading people's moods, anticipating their reactions, and adjusting your behavior to avoid conflict. These habits were not signs of weakness. They were survival strategies. As children, we depend on adults for love, protection, and belonging. When acceptance feels uncertain, we naturally adapt. The problem is that many of those childhood survival strategies continue long after they are needed. What once protected you may now be limiting you. As you grew older, those patterns followed you into school, friendships, relationships, and work. You became the person who volunteered first, apologized quickly, and rarely complained. You tried to avoid disappointing anyone because somewhere deep inside, disappointment still felt like rejection. That fear is incredibly powerful. Human beings are wired for connection. For thousands of years, belonging to a group meant safety and survival. Being rejected could mean isolation and danger. Although modern life has changed dramatically, our brains still react strongly to social rejection. A harsh comment, a cold response, or someone's disappointment can trigger emotional alarms that feel far bigger than the situation itself. For a people pleaser, these alarms become constant companions. A delayed text message becomes proof that someone is upset. A disagreement feels like the end of a relationship. Constructive feedback sounds like personal failure. Even small moments of tension can create overwhelming anxiety because they awaken an old fear. If people stop liking me, I won't be enough. This is why approval becomes so addictive. Every compliment brings temporary relief. Every expression of gratitude feels reassuring. Every smile confirms that you're doing the right thing. But like any addiction, the feeling never lasts. Soon you begin searching for the next compliment, the next thank you, the next sign that you're still accepted. The cycle repeats endlessly because external validation was never designed to provide lasting security. Imagine trying to fill a bucket with water while there is a hole in the bottom. No matter how much water you pour in, it keeps leaking out. Approval works the same way. It can make you feel better for a moment, but it cannot repair a sense of worth that depends entirely on other people. That's why even highly successful people can remain trapped in people-pleasing. They receive praise, promotions, admiration, and recognition, yet still feel anxious whenever someone criticizes them. Their confidence depends on circumstances they cannot control. Another reason people-pleasing becomes deeply rooted is that society often rewards it. Helpful people are praised. Selfless people are admired. Those who always say yes are often described as reliable and generous. These qualities are valuable, but only when they come from freedom rather than fear. There is a significant difference between generosity and self-sacrifice. Generosity is giving because you choose to. Self-sacrifice is giving because you believe you have no choice. One nourishes your relationships, the other slowly empties you. Many people spend years believing they are simply nice, but kindness should never require you to abandon yourself. Healthy relationships are built on mutual respect, not one-sided emotional labor. They allow both people to have needs, opinions, boundaries, and imperfections. The good news is that understanding where your people-pleasing came from is not about blaming your parents, your teachers, your friends, or your past. It is about developing compassion for yourself. The habits you carry today were often intelligent responses to earlier experiences. They helped you survive emotionally. They helped you fit in. They helped you feel loved when you needed it most. But survival is different from living. The strategies that once protected you may now be preventing you from becoming the person you truly are. Healing begins the moment you stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "What taught me to believe I had to earn love?" That single shift changes everything. Instead of seeing yourself as broken, you begin to see yourself as someone who adapted. And what has been learned can also be unlearned. The need for everyone to like you is not your identity. It is a habit built over years of fear, conditioning, and repeated experiences. Like any habit, it can be replaced with something stronger, the quiet confidence that your worth does not depend on constant approval. As this journey continues, you'll discover that freedom doesn't come from making everyone happy. It comes from finally believing that you are enough, even when someone disagrees with you, misunderstands you, or simply doesn't approve. That is where true self-worth begins. Chapter 3. The Trap of Always Saying Yes. For a people-pleaser, saying yes often feels easier than saying no. It avoids awkward conversations, prevents disappointment, and keeps everyone around you happy, at least for the moment. But beneath every automatic yes is a question that rarely gets asked. What is this yes costing me? Most people never stop to think about it. They simply keep agreeing, helping, volunteering, and sacrificing until one day they realize they've spent years building everyone else's life while quietly neglecting their own. The habit of always saying yes rarely begins with bad intentions. Most people pleasers are compassionate individuals. They genuinely enjoy helping others. They like being dependable, supportive, and generous. The problem is not kindness itself. The problem begins when helping others becomes an obligation instead of a choice. Instead of asking whether they have the time, energy, or desire to help, people pleasers automatically agree because they fear what might happen if they refuse. That fear often sounds like an inner voice saying, "They'll think I'm selfish. I'll disappoint them. They may not ask me again. What if they stop liking me?" These thoughts appear so quickly that they feel like facts rather than fears. Before you have a chance to consider your own needs, you've already said yes. Imagine you're finishing a long day at work. You're mentally exhausted and looking forward to spending the evening resting. Just before you leave, a coworker asks if you can stay late to help finish their project. You already know that saying yes means cancelling your plans and going home exhausted. Yet almost automatically, you smile and agree. As you sit at your desk hours later, you don't feel generous. You feel frustrated. Not because you dislike helping, but because you ignored your own needs once again. This is how people-pleasing slowly steals your time. One unnecessary commitment may not seem significant, but when those commitments happen every week, every day, or even several times a day, they begin shaping your entire life. Every hour spent solving someone else's problems is an hour you cannot spend pursuing your own goals, resting your mind, strengthening your relationships, or investing in your future. Time, however, is only part of what is lost. Constantly saying yes also drains your emotional energy. Every commitment requires attention, patience, and responsibility. The more obligations you accept, the less energy remains for the things that truly matter. Eventually, even activities you once loved begin feeling like burdens because you've reached a point of emotional exhaustion. Perhaps the greatest cost of always saying yes is the gradual loss of your identity. When every decision is based on keeping someone else happy, you stop asking yourself an important question: what do I want? Instead, your life becomes centered around other people's expectations. You adapt your schedule to fit theirs. You change your priorities to meet their needs. You silence your own desires because they seem less important. Over time, this pattern becomes so familiar that you may struggle to recognize your own preferences. Someone asks what you'd like to do this weekend, and your instinctive response is, "Whatever you want is fine." They ask where you'd like to eat, what movie you'd like to watch, or what career you truly want, and you hesitate. After years of focusing on everyone else's wishes, you've forgotten how to listen to your own. Ironically, constantly saying yes doesn't always strengthen relationships. In many cases, it creates quiet resentment. You begin feeling overwhelmed by the very people you've been trying so hard to please. You wonder why no one seems to appreciate everything you do. But the truth is, most people aren't intentionally taking advantage of you. They're responding to the version of you that you've consistently shown them, the version that rarely says no. Healthy relationships require honesty, not endless sacrifice. People cannot respect boundaries they never knew existed. If you never communicate your limits, others naturally assume you're comfortable with the arrangement. This is why resentment often grows in silence. It's not created because people ask too much. It's created because you agree to more than you're genuinely willing to give. Learning to say no doesn't mean becoming selfish or uncaring. It means recognizing that your time, energy, and well-being have value too. Every time you decline a request that doesn't align with your priorities, you make room for something more meaningful. You create space for your health, your goals, your family, your dreams, and your peace of mind. Imagine your life as a garden. Every yes you give is like planting a seed. If you spend all your time watering everyone else's garden, eventually your own begins to dry out. The flowers you hoped would bloom never get the care they need. Your dreams remain untouched, your passions fade, and your sense of purpose slowly disappears. The answer isn't to stop helping others. It's to remember that your own garden deserves water too. The goal is not to eliminate kindness, but to make it intentional. A meaningful yes comes from freedom, not fear. It comes from choosing to help because you genuinely want to, not because you're afraid of disappointing someone. When your yes becomes a conscious decision instead of an automatic response, it carries greater sincerity, greater joy, and far less resentment. Every time you choose your priorities without guilt, you remind yourself that your life belongs to you, and every thoughtful no becomes a powerful yes to your peace, your purpose, and the person you are becoming. Chapter 4. The fear behind every no. For most people, saying the word no is simply a decision. For a people pleaser, it can feel like a threat. Your heart races. Your mind begins imagining the worst possible outcome. What if they think I'm selfish? What if they're disappointed? What if they stop liking me? What if I ruin the relationship? Before you've even spoken a single word, you've already convinced yourself that saying no will lead to rejection. So you do what you've always done. You say yes. Not because you want to, but because saying no feels far more painful. If you've lived this way for years, it's easy to believe that the fear is proof that you're doing something wrong. But the fear itself isn't the problem. It's simply a learned emotional response. Somewhere along the way, your mind began connecting the word no with danger. Every time you imagined disappointing someone, your brain interpreted it as losing love, approval, or belonging. The truth is, most people pleasers aren't afraid of saying no. They're afraid of what they believe no means. To them, no means rejection, no means conflict, no means letting someone down, no means being a bad person. But none of those meanings are built into the word itself. They are stories your mind has attached to it over many years. Imagine a friend calls on Friday evening and invites you to a gathering. You've had one of the most exhausting weeks of your life. You've been working long hours, sleeping poorly, and feeling emotionally drained. Deep inside, you know exactly what you need. You need rest. But instead of listening to yourself, another voice appears. They'll be disappointed if I don't go. They'll think I don't care. Maybe they won't invite me next time. So you ignore your own needs and accept the invitation. You spend the evening smiling, talking, and pretending you're enjoying yourself. Meanwhile, your body is begging for sleep, and your mind keeps thinking about how peaceful it would have been to stay home. When you finally return, you don't just feel tired. You feel frustrated, not with your friend, with yourself. This is one of the greatest tragedies of people-pleasing. We often blame ourselves for the exhaustion we created by ignoring our own needs. At the center of this struggle is guilt. Guilt can be a healthy emotion. If you've hurt someone, broken a promise, or acted unfairly, guilt encourages you to take responsibility and make things right. In that sense, guilt protects relationships, but people-pleasers experience a different kind of guilt. They feel guilty simply for having boundaries. They feel guilty for needing rest. They feel guilty for choosing themselves. They feel guilty for declining invitations, protecting their time, expressing different opinions, or asking for what they need. This isn't healthy guilt. It's conditioned guilt. It's the emotional discomfort that appears whenever you stop putting everyone else first. Learning to recognize this difference changes everything. Feeling guilty doesn't automatically mean you've done something wrong. Sometimes it simply means you're doing something unfamiliar. Think about learning to ride a bicycle. The first few attempts feel awkward and uncomfortable. That discomfort doesn't mean cycling is wrong. It means you're developing a new skill. Setting boundaries works the same way. If you've spent years saying yes to everything, your first few no's will probably feel uncomfortable. That discomfort isn't failure, it's growth. Another powerful fear that keeps people-pleasers trapped is the fear of conflict. Many people believe conflict destroys relationships. In reality, avoiding every conflict often destroys them much faster. When you never express your true feelings, small frustrations begin accumulating beneath the surface. You smile when you're irritated. You agree when you disagree. You stay silent when something hurts you. Eventually, those buried emotions become resentment, and resentment has a way of appearing in unexpected moments. A tiny request suddenly feels overwhelming. A small disagreement turns into an emotional explosion. Not because of what happened today, but because of everything you've been carrying for months or even years. Healthy conflict is different. Healthy conflict allows two people to express different needs while still respecting one another. Strong relationships aren't built because people never disagree. They're built because people can disagree honestly without abandoning respect. Here's another truth that many people pleasers need to hear. Disappointing someone is not the same as hurting them. Someone may feel disappointed because you declined an invitation. Someone may feel frustrated because you couldn't help them this weekend. Someone may wish you had made a different decision. Their disappointment is real, but that doesn't automatically mean you've acted unfairly. Adults experience disappointment every day. Plans change. People have different priorities. Schedules don't always align. Healthy relationships make room for those realities. Imagine a family member asks you to spend your entire weekend helping them move. You already promised yourself that this weekend would be dedicated to recovering from months of burnout and finishing an important personal project. In the past, you would have immediately agreed. This time, you pause. You kindly explain that you're unavailable, but offer to help another day instead. For a moment, they look disappointed. Immediately, your old instincts awaken. Maybe I should cancel my plans. Maybe I'm being selfish. But instead of changing your answer, you stay calm. You allow them to experience their disappointment. A remarkable thing happens. The world doesn't end. Your relationship survives. And for the first time, you've respected both yourself and the other person by being honest. One of the most difficult lessons in overcoming people-pleasing is accepting that you are not responsible for managing everyone else's emotions. You are responsible for being respectful. You are responsible for being honest. You are responsible for acting with kindness and integrity. But you are not responsible for ensuring that everyone is happy with every decision you make. Those are very different responsibilities. When you take ownership of emotions that belong to other people, you carry a weight that was never yours to begin with. As you continue this journey, you'll discover something surprising. Every healthy no strengthens your confidence. Every honest boundary teaches your mind that disagreement is survivable. Every respectful refusal weakens the old belief that your worth depends on pleasing everyone. The fear won't disappear overnight. It may whisper that people will judge you. It may tempt you to apologize for taking care of yourself. It may tell you that your needs don't matter. Don't believe it. Every time you choose honesty over fear, you reclaim another piece of yourself. And one day you'll realize that saying no is no longer an act of guilt. It's an act of self-respect, because every meaningful no protects the life you're finally learning to call your own. Chapter 5. Wearing the perfect mask. Have you ever noticed that you seem like a different person depending on who you're with? Around one group of friends, you're cheerful and outgoing. Around your family, you're quiet and agreeable. At work, you become the person who never complains. In a relationship, you constantly adapt to your partner's preferences. None of these versions of you are completely fake, but neither do they fully represent who you truly are. Instead, they are carefully crafted masks designed to earn acceptance and avoid rejection. For many people-pleasers, this shape-shifting becomes so natural that they no longer realize they're doing it. The mask is rarely created overnight. It forms slowly through years of learning that being your authentic self doesn't always feel safe. Perhaps you discovered that expressing your opinions led to criticism. Maybe showing anger made people withdraw from you. Maybe asking for help was seen as weakness, or saying no brought disappointment. Over time, you learned an important but harmful lesson. If you become the person others want you to be, life feels easier. People smile more, they argue less, they approve of you more often. The mask begins as protection, but eventually it becomes a prison. One of the most common signs of wearing this mask is hiding your true opinions. You might agree with conversations even when you quietly disagree. You laugh at jokes that don't seem funny. You nod during discussions while your mind is saying something completely different. You avoid expressing political views, personal beliefs, career dreams, or even simple preferences because you're afraid that honesty might create distance between you and someone else. Imagine sitting with a group of friends deciding where to eat. Everyone quickly agrees on a restaurant you don't enjoy. You know you'd prefer somewhere else, but instead of speaking up, you smile and say, "I'm fine with anything." It seems like such a small decision. After all, it's only dinner. But now imagine making similar choices every day for years. You let others choose the restaurant, the movie, the vacation, the plans for the weekend, even the direction of your career. Gradually, your life becomes a collection of decisions made by everyone except you. Many people pleasers believe that avoiding conflict keeps relationships healthy. In reality, constantly avoiding conflict often prevents relationships from becoming genuine. When people only know the version of you that always agrees, they never truly know you. They know the mask. They know the carefully edited version that never disagrees, never asks for too much, and never causes inconvenience. While this may create temporary harmony, it also creates emotional loneliness. You can be surrounded by people who love you and still feel unseen because they're loving a version of you that isn't completely real. There is another hidden cost to wearing the perfect mask: the constant pressure to maintain it. Once people become accustomed to seeing you as endlessly patient, endlessly available, and endlessly agreeable, you begin feeling responsible for keeping that image alive. Every conversation becomes a performance. Every interaction requires emotional calculation. You ask yourself, "What should I say?" instead of "What do I honestly think?" You wonder, "How should I act?" instead of "How do I actually feel?" Living this way is mentally exhausting because you're always managing impressions instead of simply being yourself. Over time, something even more concerning begins to happen. The line between the mask and your true identity starts to blur. If you've spent years adapting to everyone else's expectations, you may struggle to recognize your own preferences. Someone asks what kind of music you enjoy, and you hesitate. They ask where you'd like to travel, what hobbies excite you, or what goals matter most, and you aren't quite sure. Not because you lack interests, but because you've spent so much time adjusting to others that you've stopped listening to your own voice. This is why so many people pleasers eventually feel disconnected from themselves. They wake up one day realizing they've built a life that looks successful from the outside, but doesn't feel meaningful on the inside. They've spent years becoming everything everyone else wanted, while quietly neglecting the person they were always meant to become. One powerful example of this happens in social situations. Imagine you're spending time with co-workers who begin criticizing an idea you actually believe in. You remain silent because you don't want to seem different. Later that evening, you meet another group of friends who support that same idea, and suddenly you nod along with them too. By the end of the day, you've agreed with two completely opposite opinions. Neither conversation reflected your true beliefs. Both reflected your fear of standing apart. The mask changed, but the fear remained the same. The irony is that the very behavior meant to protect relationships often weakens them. Real trust isn't built through perfect agreement. It's built through honesty. Healthy relationships allow room for different opinions, different personalities, and different needs. They don't require one person to disappear so the other can feel comfortable. In fact, people often respect those who communicate honestly and respectfully more than those who simply agree with everything. Removing the mask doesn't mean becoming rude, argumentative, or insensitive. Authenticity isn't about saying everything that comes to mind without consideration for others. It means allowing your true thoughts, feelings, values, and needs to exist without constantly editing them for approval. It means understanding that disagreement doesn't automatically destroy connection. In many cases, it deepens it because honesty creates trust. Of course, removing the mask can feel frightening. If you've spent years believing your worth depends on being liked, authenticity feels risky. You may wonder whether people will still accept you if they see the real version of you. Some may not. But those relationships were built on performance rather than truth. The people who genuinely care about you may be surprised at first, but they will have the opportunity to know someone far more valuable than the mask you've been wearing. They'll finally know you. As you continue this journey, remember this simple truth. You were never meant to spend your life auditioning for acceptance. You were never meant to become a different person for every room you entered. Your opinions matter, your preferences matter, your feelings matter. The world doesn't need another perfect performance. It needs real people who have the courage to live honestly. The mask may have protected you once, but you no longer need to hide behind it. Every time you express an honest opinion, admit what you truly want, or allow yourself to disagree respectfully, the mask becomes a little lighter. And as it slowly falls away, something remarkable begins to emerge. Not a new person, but the person who has been there all along, patiently waiting for the chance to be seen. Chapter 6. The exhaustion of living for everyone else. There is a kind of exhaustion that sleep cannot fix. It isn't the tiredness you feel after a long day of work or an intense workout. It's deeper than that. It settles into your mind, your emotions, and even your spirit. You wake up tired. You move through your day feeling drained. Even the things you once enjoyed begin to feel like obligations. You wonder why you're so exhausted when you've been doing what you've always believed was the right thing, helping others. The answer is simple but difficult to accept. You've been giving away parts of yourself for so long that there's very little left for you. People pleasers are often praised for being generous, dependable, and selfless. They are the first to offer help and the last to ask for it. They remember birthdays, solve problems, listen patiently, and make sacrifices without expecting recognition. From the outside, they appear incredibly strong, but strength is not the same as endless availability. Even the strongest person has limits. The problem begins when kindness slowly transforms into self-abandonment. Self-abandonment doesn't happen through one dramatic decision. It happens through thousands of tiny moments. You ignore your own feelings because someone else's emotions seem more important. You postpone your own goals because someone needs your time. You dismiss your exhaustion because you don't want to disappoint anyone. You convince yourself that your needs can wait. Today, tomorrow, next week, next year. Eventually waiting becomes your lifestyle. Imagine carrying a backpack. At first someone asks you to hold one small stone. It isn't heavy, so you gladly agree. Then another person adds another stone. Then another. Because each individual request seems manageable, you never stop to notice the growing weight. Years later, you're carrying a backpack so heavy that every step feels exhausting. Yet instead of removing the stones, you apologize for walking too slowly. This is what emotional self-abandonment feels like. Every unnecessary commitment, every forced smile, every hidden emotion, every reluctant yes, they all become another stone in the backpack. Eventually, the weight becomes impossible to ignore. One of the first signs of emotional exhaustion is constant fatigue. You may get enough sleep, yet still feel drained throughout the day. Conversations that once energized you now leave you emotionally empty. Even small requests begin to feel overwhelming because your emotional reserves have been depleted. The difficult part is that many people pleasers don't recognize the real cause of their exhaustion. They assume they're simply busy. They blame work. They blame stress. They blame lack of sleep. While those factors certainly matter, the deeper issue is often emotional overcommitment. You've spent so much energy managing other people's happiness that you've neglected your own. Another consequence of self-abandonment is resentment. This surprises many people because resentment seems incompatible with kindness. After all, if you willingly agreed to help, why would you feel resentful? The answer lies beneath the surface. Most resentment isn't created because people ask too much. It's created because we give more than we're honestly willing to give. Imagine a close friend regularly calls you whenever they're facing a problem. You answer every call, listen for hours, offer advice, and provide comfort. Weeks turn into months. Eventually, you realize something uncomfortable. Whenever you need someone to listen to you, they're unavailable. Instead of expressing your disappointment, you continue showing up for them. Your frustration grows. Not because your friend intentionally mistreated you, but because you never communicated your own needs. Resentment often grows in the silence where boundaries should have existed. This is why unspoken expectations become so dangerous. People pleasers frequently hope others will notice their sacrifices without ever mentioning them. They expect appreciation, understanding, or reciprocity. Sometimes that happens. Often it doesn't. Not because people are cruel, because they simply don't know what you've been suppressing. No one can respond to needs you've never expressed. Another painful consequence of living for everyone else is losing touch with your dreams. Think back to the ambitions you once had. Maybe you wanted to start a business, write a book, learn a new language, travel, paint, exercise regularly, develop a new skill, spend quiet evenings reading. How many of those dreams have been postponed because someone else's priorities always came first? Life has a way of filling every empty space. If you don't intentionally protect time for yourself, other people's requests will gladly occupy it. Days become months, months become years. Then one morning you wake up wondering where the time went. One of the greatest tragedies of people-pleasing isn't that you help others, it's that you slowly stop helping yourself. Imagine a garden where every flower receives water except one. Each morning, you carefully water every plant around it. You devote your attention to making sure everything else thrives. Meanwhile, the forgotten flower quietly begins to wither. Eventually, someone asks why it's dying. The answer is obvious. It was never watered. Many people treat themselves exactly this way. They encourage everyone else, support everyone else, forgive everyone else, believe in everyone else, yet they rarely offer themselves the same compassion. You deserve the care you so freely give to others. Taking care of yourself isn't selfish, it's responsible. There's a reason airlines instruct passengers to put on their own oxygen mask before helping others. It isn't because your life matters more than anyone else's. It's because you cannot save someone else if you've already lost the ability to breathe. The same principle applies emotionally. When you're constantly exhausted, your patience decreases. Your joy fades, your creativity disappears, your relationships begin to suffer. Ironically, trying to be endlessly available eventually makes you less capable of genuinely helping anyone. Rest is not laziness, boundaries are not rejection, saying no is not cruelty. These are the practices that protect your ability to continue showing up with sincerity instead of obligation. Many people fear that if they stop sacrificing themselves, they'll become selfish. But selfish people rarely worry about being selfish. People pleasers worry constantly. The goal isn't to stop caring about others. The goal is to care about yourself with equal importance. Imagine your emotional energy as a cup of water. Every conversation, responsibility, favor and commitment pours a little water out. If you never refill the cup, eventually it becomes empty. Yet many people pleasers keep pouring from an empty cup, hoping somehow more water will appear. It never does. The cup must be refilled. That means protecting quiet time without guilt, sleeping enough, pursuing hobbies that bring joy, saying no when your schedule is full, allowing yourself to rest before exhaustion becomes burnout, asking for help instead of always being the helper, listening to your own emotions with the same compassion you offer everyone else. These actions are not signs of weakness. They are signs of emotional maturity. Perhaps the most beautiful realization on this journey is understanding that your worth has never depended on how much you sacrifice. You do not earn love by exhausting yourself. You do not become valuable by constantly proving your usefulness. You do not have to disappear so that everyone else can shine. Your needs matter. Your dreams matter. Your health matters. Your peace matters. The world does not benefit from a version of you that is constantly overwhelmed, emotionally drained, and quietly resentful. It benefits from a version of you who is healthy enough to give freely, wise enough to set boundaries, and confident enough to believe that caring for yourself is not the opposite of caring for others. It is the foundation of it. Because kindness without self-respect eventually becomes sacrifice. But kindness supported by self-respect becomes something far more powerful. It becomes love, both for others and for yourself. Chapter 7. Breaking the Approval Addiction. One of the strongest forces behind people-pleasing is not kindness, it is the need for approval. Deep inside, many people-pleasers carry an unspoken belief. If people approve of me, then I must be worthy. If they don't, then something must be wrong with me. This belief quietly influences almost every decision they make. It determines what they say, how they behave, what opportunities they pursue, and even how they see themselves. Without realizing it, they hand over the responsibility for their happiness to everyone around them. Approval feels wonderful. A compliment from a friend, praise from a manager, appreciation from a family member, or even a simple thank you can brighten your entire day. There is nothing wrong with enjoying these moments. Every human being appreciates encouragement and recognition. The problem begins when approval changes from something you enjoy into something you depend on. At that point, it stops being a pleasant bonus and becomes an emotional necessity. Think about someone who constantly checks their phone after posting something online. Every new notification brings a small burst of excitement. Every like, comment, or positive response feels like proof that they matter. But if the response is smaller than expected, their mood changes. They begin questioning themselves. They wonder whether people liked him, whether they said the wrong thing, or whether they are simply not interesting enough. Their emotions rise and fall according to the reactions of complete strangers. While social media has made this pattern more visible, the same emotional cycle exists in everyday life for many people-pleasers. Perhaps you notice yourself replaying conversations long after they have ended. You wonder if you sounded foolish. You worry that someone misunderstood your words. You analyze every facial expression, every pause, and every sentence, searching for signs that someone might not like you anymore. Hours later, you are still carrying a conversation that everyone else has already forgotten. This constant search for reassurance is exhausting because your mind never gets permission to rest. The difficult truth about approval is that it can never fully satisfy you. Imagine trying to fill a bucket that has a hole in the bottom. Every compliment pours a little water into the bucket. Every expression of appreciation adds a little more. But because your sense of worth depends entirely on those compliments, the water keeps leaking away. Soon the bucket feels empty again, and you begin searching for the next source of validation. No matter how much praise you receive, it never feels like enough, because the problem was never the amount of approval. The problem was believing that approval could replace self-worth. This explains why some of the most admired people in the world still struggle with insecurity. They receive awards, applause, promotions, and admiration, yet one piece of criticism can overshadow 100 compliments. When your confidence depends on what other people think, it will always remain unstable, because opinions constantly change. Someone who praises you today may criticize you tomorrow. Someone who understands you now may misunderstand you later. If your identity rises and falls with every opinion, your peace will never last. Many people spend years trying to become the perfect employee, the perfect partner, the perfect parent, or the perfect friend, or the perfect friend. They believe that if they can just avoid mistakes and make everyone happy, they will finally feel secure. But perfection is an impossible destination. No matter how kind, generous, talented, or thoughtful you become, there will always be someone who disagrees with you, misunderstands your intentions, or simply doesn't like you. This isn't because you failed. It's because human beings are different. Different personalities, values, experiences, and expectations naturally create different opinions. One of the greatest turning points in overcoming people-pleasing comes when you realize that not everyone has to approve of you for you to respect yourself. This idea feels uncomfortable at first because it challenges years of emotional conditioning. You may still feel anxious when someone disagrees with you. You may still notice the urge to explain yourself, defend every decision, or win back someone's approval. But instead of automatically obeying that urge, you can begin observing it. You can remind yourself that discomfort is not danger. It is simply the feeling of breaking an old habit. Imagine you've worked hard on an important presentation at work. After the meeting, several colleagues compliment your ideas, but one person offers criticism. Instead of remembering the praise, your mind becomes completely consumed by the negative comment. You replay it throughout the day, wondering whether everyone secretly agrees with that criticism. By evening, you've forgotten all the encouragement you received because your attention became trapped by one person's opinion. This is how approval addiction works. It teaches your brain to chase acceptance, while treating criticism as a personal threat rather than useful information. Breaking this addiction begins by changing where you look for validation. Instead of asking, "Did everyone like what I did?" begin asking, "Did I act according to my values?" Instead of asking, "Was everyone happy with me?" ask, "Was I honest, respectful, and true to myself?" These questions shift your focus from external approval to internal integrity. The goal is no longer to control how others respond. The goal is to become someone you respect regardless of their response. This doesn't mean ignoring feedback or believing you're always right. Healthy people remain open to learning and growing. They listen when others offer constructive advice. They apologize when they make mistakes. They adjust their behavior when necessary. The difference is that they no longer confuse criticism with worthlessness. They understand that making a mistake does not make them a failure, and disagreement does not make them unlovable. One of the most effective ways to build self-worth is to keep small promises to yourself. Every time you honor a personal commitment, you send yourself an important message: I can trust myself. If you promise to exercise, exercise. If you promise to spend an evening resting, protect that time. If you promise to speak honestly during a conversation, follow through. Confidence is not created by convincing everyone else to believe in you. It is created by proving to yourself that your own word matters. It also helps to celebrate your progress privately, instead of waiting for someone else to notice it. You don't need applause every time you grow. Sometimes the greatest victories happen quietly. The first time you say no without apologizing. The first time you express an unpopular opinion respectfully. The first time you stop chasing someone's approval and simply allow them to have their own opinion. These moments may seem small, but they represent profound personal freedom. As your dependence on approval begins to fade, something remarkable happens. You become calmer. You stop overthinking every conversation. You stop trying to control how people see you. You begin making decisions based on your values instead of your fears. Relationships become healthier because they are built on honesty rather than performance. You discover that your worth has never been something other people could give you or take away from you. The desire to be liked is human, but the need to be liked by everyone is a prison. The day you stop measuring your value by other people's opinions is the day you begin reclaiming your life. Real confidence doesn't come from hearing endless praise. It comes from knowing who you are, standing by your values, and understanding that your worth remains unchanged, even when someone chooses not to approve. That is the freedom waiting on the other side of approval addiction. Chapter 8. Setting boundaries without feeling like a bad person. For many people-pleasers, the word boundary feels uncomfortable. It sounds cold, distant, or even selfish. You may imagine someone pushing others away, refusing to help, or building walls that keep people out. But healthy boundaries are not walls, they are doors. They allow the right people to come close, while protecting your peace, your time, and your emotional well-being. Without boundaries, kindness slowly turns into obligation, generosity becomes exhaustion, and relationships lose their balance. One of the biggest misconceptions about boundaries is the belief that they exist to control other people. They do not. A boundary is not about changing someone else's behavior. It is about deciding what you will and will not accept in your own life. It is a quiet declaration that says, "This is what I need to remain healthy, respectful, and emotionally balanced." Instead of trying to manage another person's actions, you take responsibility for your own choices. People pleasers often avoid setting boundaries because they confuse them with rejection. They believe that saying no means saying, "I don't care about you." In reality, saying no often means something very different. It means, "I care about both of us enough to be honest." A relationship built on guilt, resentment, and silent sacrifice may appear peaceful on the surface, but underneath it becomes fragile. Honesty may create temporary discomfort, but it creates lasting trust. Imagine a relative who calls you every evening expecting long conversations. At first, you happily answer every call. Over time, however, those conversations begin lasting an hour or more. Your evenings disappear. You no longer have time to relax, read, exercise, or spend uninterrupted moments with your family. Yet every time the phone rings, you answer because you fear hurting their feelings. Eventually, frustration begins replacing affection. You start hoping they won't call. You feel guilty for thinking that way, but you can't ignore your exhaustion anymore. Now imagine responding differently. One evening you kindly explain, "I really enjoy talking with you, but my evenings have become very busy. I won't always be able to stay on the phone for long. Let's catch up for 15 or 20 minutes instead." At first, they may sound disappointed. Your old instincts immediately whisper, "See, you've upset them." But instead of changing your mind, you remain calm and respectful. A few weeks later, something interesting happens. They adjust. Your relationship continues. And for the first time in a long while, your evenings belong to you again. This is what healthy boundaries do. They don't destroy relationships. They teach people how to have healthier relationships with you. One reason boundaries feel so difficult is that people pleasers often believe they are responsible for other people's emotions. If someone feels disappointed, they immediately assume they have done something wrong. If someone becomes frustrated, they rush to fix the situation. If someone reacts with anger, they question whether they should simply give in to restore peace. But there is an important distinction every people pleaser must learn. You are responsible for your behavior. You are not responsible for another person's emotional reaction to your healthy choices. If you communicate with honesty, kindness, and respect, you have already fulfilled your responsibility. How another person chooses to respond belongs to them. This realization can feel uncomfortable because it challenges years of emotional conditioning. You may still feel guilty when someone reacts negatively to your boundary. But remember, guilt is not always a sign that you've done something wrong. Sometimes it's simply evidence that you're doing something differently. Think about the first time you exercised after months of inactivity. Your muscles probably felt sore. That soreness didn't mean exercise was harmful. It meant your body was adapting to a healthier pattern. Boundaries work the same way. The emotional discomfort you experience at first isn't proof that boundaries are wrong. It's proof that you're strengthening emotional muscles you've rarely used. Another challenge people pleasers face is the urge to over-explain every decision. Instead of simply saying, "I'm unavailable," they provide long explanations, detailed excuses, and repeated apologies. Deep down, they hope that if they explain enough, no one will be disappointed. But excessive explanations often send an unintended message. They suggest that your decision requires someone else's approval before it becomes valid. Imagine a coworker asks you to stay late and help with another project. You already have important personal plans. Instead of saying, "I'm sorry, I won't be able to stay tonight," you spend 5 minutes explaining your schedule, your responsibilities, your reasons, and your guilt. The longer you explain, the more your confidence begins to disappear. Healthy boundaries don't require lengthy defenses. Respectful honesty is enough. A simple, calm response often carries far more confidence than an elaborate justification. Of course, setting boundaries doesn't guarantee everyone will respond positively. Some people may be surprised because they've become accustomed to unlimited access to your time and energy. Others may resist because your new boundaries require them to adjust their expectations. This doesn't necessarily mean they're bad people. It simply means they're adapting to a different version of you. Remember, you've likely spent years teaching people that you're always available. Changing that pattern naturally takes time. The people who genuinely care about you may need a little time to adjust, but healthy relationships usually become stronger as expectations become clearer. Unfortunately, not every relationship welcomes healthy boundaries. Some individuals benefit from your inability to say no. They may become upset when you stop solving every problem or meeting every request. They may accuse you of changing, becoming selfish, or caring less than before. When this happens, ask yourself an important question. Did this relationship depend on my constant self-sacrifice? If the answer is yes, then the relationship wasn't built on mutual respect. It was built on imbalance. Healthy people appreciate honesty, even when they feel disappointed. Unhealthy relationships often rely on guilt, obligation, and emotional pressure to maintain control. Boundaries help reveal the difference. One of the greatest gifts boundaries provide is clarity. They show you who respects your time, who values your honesty, and who expects endless sacrifice. They allow your relationships to become based on choice instead of obligation. Perhaps the most beautiful truth about boundaries is that they make your kindness more meaningful. Imagine receiving a gift from someone who felt forced to give it. Now imagine receiving the same gift from someone who genuinely wanted to give it. The gift may look identical, but its meaning is completely different. The same principle applies to generosity. When you help because you're afraid to refuse, your kindness carries hidden resentment. When you help because you've freely chosen to, your kindness carries joy. Boundaries protect that freedom. They ensure your yes remains genuine instead of automatic. As you continue this journey, begin viewing boundaries not as barriers between you and other people, but as bridges between you and yourself. Every healthy boundary is a promise that says, I will no longer abandon my own needs in order to earn acceptance. Every respectful no protects your energy for the people and priorities that truly matter. Every honest conversation strengthens your confidence and reminds you that your voice deserves to be heard. You do not become a bad person because you protect your peace. You do not become selfish because you value your time. You do not become unkind because you refuse to carry burdens that were never yours. In fact, the opposite is true. The healthier your boundaries become, the more genuine your compassion becomes. You stop giving because you feel trapped, and you begin giving because you truly want to. Your relationships become more honest, your mind becomes more peaceful, and your life begins to reflect your own values instead of everyone else's expectations. That is the quiet power of boundaries. They don't separate you from the people you love. They simply ensure that while loving others, you never lose yourself again. Chapter 9. Let people be disappointed. One of the hardest lessons a people pleaser will ever learn is this. Someone will be disappointed with you, no matter how kind you are. You can give your time, your energy, your attention, and your heart. You can do your best to meet everyone's expectations. You can sacrifice your own needs again and again. Yet eventually, someone will still wish you had done more, acted differently, or made another choice. At first, this truth feels uncomfortable. Most people pleasers have spent years believing that disappointment is something to avoid at all costs. If someone feels hurt, frustrated, or unhappy, they immediately assume they have failed. They rush to fix the situation, apologize excessively, or change their decision just to restore harmony. But disappointment is not proof that you've done something wrong. It is proof that two people had different expectations. That is a normal part of every healthy relationship. The problem begins when you make it your life's mission to prevent anyone from ever feeling disappointed. The moment you take responsibility for everyone's happiness, you unknowingly surrender your own. Every decision becomes a calculation. Every conversation becomes a performance. Instead of asking, what is the right choice for me? You ask, what choice will upset the fewest people? That question slowly steals your freedom. Imagine you've promised yourself that this weekend will be different. For months you've been working long hours. You've ignored your health, postponed your hobbies, and barely spent time with your family. Finally, you've blocked off 2 days to rest, recover, and reconnect with the people closest to you. On Friday afternoon, a friend calls. They invite you on a last-minute trip. In the past, you would have said yes immediately, even if it meant breaking promises to yourself. You would have convinced yourself that your own plans could wait. This time, however, you politely decline. Your friend sounds disappointed. For a moment, the familiar guilt returns. Maybe I should change my mind. What if they think I don't value our friendship? Maybe I'm being selfish. But instead of abandoning yourself, you stay with the discomfort. You kindly explain that you've already committed to something important. The conversation ends. Your friend may still feel disappointed. But something remarkable has happened. For the first time, you chose honesty over fear. Many people-pleasers confuse disappointing someone with rejecting them. These are not the same thing. Rejecting someone means dismissing their value or treating them without respect. Disappointing someone often simply means that your priorities are different from theirs in that particular moment. Healthy adults understand this. They may not always like your decisions, but they recognize that every person has the right to make choices based on their own needs, responsibilities, and values. Another reason disappointment feels so frightening is because people-pleasers often mistake it for rejection. Somewhere deep inside, they believe that if someone is disappointed, they will eventually stop loving them. But think about your own relationships. Have you ever felt disappointed by someone you genuinely cared about? Of course you have. Perhaps a friend cancelled plans. Perhaps a family member couldn't attend an important event. Perhaps a coworker disagreed with your idea. You may have felt disappointed for a while, but that disappointment probably didn't erase your respect or affection for them. The same is true in reverse. People are often far more emotionally resilient than your fears suggest. One of the greatest obstacles to overcoming people-pleasing is realizing that you are not responsible for protecting everyone from uncomfortable emotions. Disappointment is part of life. So is frustration. So is disagreement. These emotions are not emergencies. They are ordinary human experiences. When you constantly rescue people from disappointment, you unintentionally prevent them from developing emotional resilience. You teach them that your needs will always come second, and over time, they begin expecting it. This creates an unhealthy pattern. You become responsible for maintaining everyone else's comfort while quietly sacrificing your own. Eventually, resentment begins replacing generosity. The irony is that the more you try to keep everyone happy, the less authentic your relationships become. People begin loving the version of you that never says no, never disagrees, and never has conflicting priorities. But that version isn't completely real. It's a performance built on fear. Real relationships require honesty. They require room for different opinions, different schedules, different goals, and different needs. Without those differences, relationships become based on compliance rather than connection. Imagine a daughter who has always agreed with every family expectation. She attends every gathering, accepts every request, and rarely expresses her own preferences. Deep down, however, she dreams of accepting a job in another city. When she finally shares her decision, some relatives become disappointed. They wanted her to stay close. For years, she would have abandoned her dream to avoid upsetting anyone. Instead, she listens respectfully, acknowledges their feelings, and continues with her decision. The disappointment doesn't disappear overnight, but neither does the love. Over time, her family adjusts. More importantly, she begins building a life that reflects her own values instead of everyone else's expectations. This is what emotional maturity looks like. Not avoiding disappointment, learning to survive it. Perhaps the greatest freedom comes when you realize that someone else's disappointment does not automatically require your action. Sometimes the most loving response is simply to listen. You can say, "I understand you're disappointed." You can acknowledge their feelings without changing your decision. This simple distinction transforms relationships. Instead of taking responsibility for fixing every uncomfortable emotion, You allow people the dignity of experiencing their own feelings. That isn't cruel, it's respectful. Another important lesson is understanding the difference between guilt and responsibility. If you've acted carelessly, broken a promise without reason, or treated someone unfairly, taking responsibility is the right thing to do. But if you've made a thoughtful decision that honors your values while remaining respectful, you are not responsible for eliminating every negative emotion another person experiences. Those emotions belong to them. One question can help guide you whenever guilt begins taking over. Ask yourself, am I disappointing them because I have been unkind, or because I am finally being honest? The answer will often reveal the difference. As you continue practicing healthier choices, you'll notice something unexpected. The people who genuinely love and respect you begin adjusting. They learn your boundaries. They appreciate your honesty. They trust your yes because they know it isn't automatic. And the relationships that depended entirely on your self-sacrifice begin revealing themselves for what they truly were. Not partnerships, dependencies. There is incredible peace in accepting that you cannot make everyone happy. It frees you from carrying burdens that were never yours. It allows you to make decisions based on wisdom instead of fear. It teaches you that your value does not rise because someone approves of you, nor does it fall because someone feels disappointed. Your worth remains the same, always. The goal of this journey has never been to become someone who doesn't care about others. It has been to become someone who cares without abandoning themselves. There will always be moments when your choices disappoint someone. That is not the end of love. It is often the beginning of authenticity. The day you stop measuring your life by how many people you keep happy is the day you finally begin living a life that is truly your own. And in that life, you discover something extraordinary. You don't have to make everyone happy to find peace. You simply have to stop betraying yourself in the process. Chapter 10. Finding your voice again. For many years, your voice may have been present, but it was never truly heard. You spoke when someone asked you a question. You laughed when everyone else laughed. You agreed when disagreement felt risky. You apologized when it wasn't necessary. You softened your opinions, hid your feelings, and carefully chose words that would keep everyone comfortable. You learned how to communicate without causing conflict, but somewhere along the way, you stopped communicating honestly. This is one of the quietest losses of people-pleasing. You don't lose your ability to speak, you lose your willingness to express who you really are. Finding your voice again isn't about talking more. It isn't about becoming louder, more aggressive, or more opinionated. It is about allowing your thoughts, feelings, needs, and values to exist without constantly filtering them through one question. Will everyone approve? That question has likely guided countless decisions in your life. Before sharing an opinion, you imagined how people might react. Before asking for what you needed, you worried about being a burden. Before disagreeing with someone, you pictured rejection or conflict. Instead of expressing yourself honestly, you became an expert at reading the room and adjusting yourself to fit it. At first, this may have felt like wisdom. Over time, it became silence. The problem with silence is that it creates an invisible distance between you and everyone around you. People can only know the version of you that you allow them to see. If you constantly hide your true thoughts and feelings, they never have the opportunity to know the real person behind the mask. Many people assume that staying quiet protects relationships. Sometimes it protects comfort. But comfort and connection are not the same thing. Real connection requires honesty. Imagine you're sitting in a team meeting at work. Your manager presents an idea that everyone quickly supports. As you listen, you notice a significant problem that no one else seems to have considered. You believe the plan could create unnecessary difficulties later. Your heart begins beating faster. You think, what if everyone thinks I'm negative? What if I'm wrong? What if speaking up makes me look difficult? So you remain silent. Weeks later, the exact problem you noticed becomes reality. You feel frustrated, not because you wanted to be right, but because you abandoned your own voice. This experience happens far beyond the workplace. It happens in friendships, marriages, families, and everyday conversations. People pleasers often confuse peace with silence. But silence is not always peaceful. Sometimes silence is simply fear wearing a calm expression. One of the reasons speaking honestly feels so difficult is because people pleasers believe every conversation has only two outcomes. Either people agree with me or they reject me. Reality is much more balanced. Healthy relationships make room for different opinions. Two people can disagree and still respect each other. Two friends can choose different paths and remain close. Two family members can see the world differently without loving each other less. Disagreement is not the enemy of connection. Dishonesty is. Another common habit among people pleasers is minimizing their own needs. Instead of saying, "I'm overwhelmed," they say, "It's fine." Instead of saying, "I need some time to myself," they say, "Maybe later." Instead of saying, "That hurt my feelings," they pretend nothing happened. These small moments may seem insignificant, but together they create a life where everyone understands your politeness while very few understand your truth. Imagine a close friend repeatedly changes plans at the last minute. Each time it happens, you tell them it's okay, even though you're disappointed. Months pass and nothing changes because they have no idea how much it affects you. Finally, one day, your frustration explodes over something small. Your friend is confused. From their perspective, everything seemed fine. They weren't ignoring your feelings, they simply never knew them. Honest communication prevents this kind of emotional buildup. Speaking your truth doesn't require anger. It requires clarity. There is tremendous strength in calmly saying, "I felt disappointed when our plans changed because I had been looking forward to spending time together." Notice how different that sounds from blame. You're not attacking, you're not accusing, you're simply allowing another person to understand your experience. That is what healthy communication looks like. Many people also hesitate to ask for what they need because they fear appearing needy, so they wait for others to notice. They hope someone will recognize their exhaustion. They hope people will understand without being told. They hope someone will read between the lines. Unfortunately, very few people can read minds. Healthy relationships depend on clear communication, not silent expectations. Imagine you've been working long hours and managing countless responsibilities at home. Instead of asking your partner for help, you continue handling everything yourself because you don't want to inconvenience them. As the weeks pass, your stress grows. Eventually, you begin believing they don't care. But perhaps they simply assumed everything was under control because you never said otherwise. The conversation you feared might have strengthened the relationship instead of weakening it. Finding your voice also means becoming comfortable with hearing the word no. This may seem surprising, but people pleasers often struggle not only with saying no, but also with receiving it. If someone declines a request, they immediately assume they've asked for too much. Healthy communication accepts that every person has the right to say both yes and no. Respect works in both directions. One of the most empowering questions you can ask yourself before speaking is this: am I staying silent to preserve peace, or because I'm afraid of being seen? The answer often reveals your true motivation. There will be moments when your voice shakes, moments when expressing yourself feels uncomfortable, moments when your old instincts beg you to stay quiet. Speak anyway. Courage isn't the absence of fear. Each time you express an opinion respectfully, your confidence grows. Each time you ask for what you need without apologizing for existing, your self-respect becomes stronger. Each time you allow yourself to disagree without feeling guilty, you remind yourself that your voice deserves space in the conversation. Over time, something remarkable begins to happen. You stop rehearsing every sentence before speaking. You stop replaying conversations long after they've ended. You stop measuring every word by whether someone else approved of it. Instead, you begin asking a different question. Was I honest? If the answer is yes, you begin sleeping more peacefully, because authenticity is far less exhausting than performance. Your voice is more than the words you speak. It is your perspective, your values, your dreams, your boundaries, your experiences, your truth. The world doesn't need another person who agrees with everyone simply to avoid conflict. It needs people who can speak with kindness, listen with humility, and live with authenticity. As you continue this journey, remember that your voice was never lost. It was only buried beneath years of fear, guilt, and the desire to be accepted. Now, with every honest conversation, every respectful boundary, and every courageous expression of your true self, you uncover it once again. And when you finally begin speaking from a place of self-respect instead of self-protection, something extraordinary happens. You no longer speak just to be heard. You speak because, at last, you believe your voice matters. And it always has. Chapter 11. Becoming someone you can finally respect. For much of your life, you may have measured your worth by a simple question: what do other people think of me? That question shaped your decisions, influenced your relationships, and quietly determined how you saw yourself. If people were happy with you, you felt valuable. If someone criticized you or seemed disappointed, your confidence disappeared. It was as though your identity belonged to everyone except you. But there comes a moment in every journey of growth when a new question replaces the old one. Can I respect the person I see in the mirror? This question changes everything. It shifts your attention away from pleasing others and toward becoming someone you can genuinely admire. It reminds you that your relationship with yourself is the one relationship you will carry for the rest of your life. Every decision you make either strengthens that relationship or weakens it. Self-respect is often misunderstood. Many people confuse it with arrogance, pride, or believing they are better than others. In reality, self-respect is much quieter than that. It is the confidence that comes from knowing you are living honestly. It is the peace that comes from keeping your word to yourself. It is the courage to make decisions that align with your values, even when those decisions are unpopular. People pleasers often sacrifice self-respect in exchange for approval. They break promises to themselves so they can keep promises to everyone else. They remain silent when something feels wrong. They ignore their own needs because they fear being judged. At first, these compromises seem small, but over time, every moment of self-betrayal sends the same message to the mind: my needs don't matter as much as everyone else's. Eventually, you begin believing it. The opposite is also true. Every time you honor your own values, you send yourself a different message: I matter. That message becomes the foundation of genuine confidence. Imagine you've decided to spend your Saturday working on a personal goal that has been sitting untouched for years. Perhaps you want to learn a new skill, improve your health, or finally begin writing the book you've always dreamed about. You've planned the day carefully because you know this goal is important to you. Then your phone rings. Someone asks you to spend the entire day helping them with a task they could easily postpone or ask someone else to do. In the past, you would have cancelled your plans immediately. You would have told yourself that your dream could wait one more weekend. This time, however, you pause. You politely explain that you've already committed to something important. You don't apologize for valuing your own time. You don't invent an excuse. You simply honor the promise you made to yourself. At first, the decision feels uncomfortable. But later that evening, something remarkable happens. You feel proud. Not because someone praised you, not because you impressed anyone. You feel proud because you respected yourself. That quiet feeling is far more powerful than temporary approval. Self-respect grows through ordinary decisions like these. It isn't built in one dramatic moment. It is built every time you choose honesty over fear, integrity over convenience, and authenticity over performance. Living by your values also requires knowing what those values actually are. Many people-pleasers spend so much time adapting to everyone else's expectations that they rarely stop to ask themselves what truly matters to them. What kind of person do you want to become? What qualities do you admire? What principles do you want your life to reflect? Perhaps you value honesty, compassion, courage, creativity, growth, loyalty, or freedom. These values become your internal compass. When you make decisions based on them rather than on other people's opinions, life becomes much clearer. This doesn't mean every decision becomes easy. There will still be moments when your values conflict with someone else's expectations. A family member may disagree with your career choice. A friend may not understand why you've set a new boundary. A coworker may dislike the fact that you no longer accept every extra responsibility. These situations are uncomfortable, but discomfort is not the same as failure. In fact, it often means you're finally living according to your own convictions instead of everyone else's demands. Another important part of self-respect is learning to trust yourself. People pleasers often doubt their own judgment because they've spent years relying on external opinions. Before making even simple decisions, they ask multiple people for advice. They search for reassurance that they're making the right choice. While seeking wisdom from others is valuable, constantly needing permission weakens your confidence. Trust grows through experience. Every time you make a thoughtful decision and accept responsibility for it, you strengthen your relationship with yourself. Sometimes you'll make mistakes. That's part of being human. Self-respect doesn't require perfection. It requires honesty. When you make a mistake, acknowledge it, learn from it, apologize if necessary. Then move forward without believing the mistake defines your worth. Confident people are not those who never fail. They are those who refuse to let failure determine their identity. There is also great freedom in realizing that not everyone has to understand your choices. For years, you may have explained every decision, hoping others would approve before you acted. Now, you begin recognizing that understanding is a gift, not a requirement. If your choices align with your values and are made with kindness and integrity, they don't need universal approval. Your life is yours to live. Perhaps the greatest reward of self-respect is inner peace. When you stop performing for acceptance, your mind becomes quieter. You stop replaying every conversation. You stop wondering whether everyone likes you. You stop chasing impossible standards. Instead, you ask one simple question at the end of each day. Did I live according to the person I want to become? If the answer is yes, you sleep with a peace that approval can never provide. As you reach this stage of your journey, remember how far you've come. You have recognized the hidden patterns of people-pleasing. You have understood where they began. You have learned to say no, to set boundaries, to let people experience disappointment, and to speak with honesty. Now all of those lessons come together in one powerful truth. Your greatest responsibility is not to become the person everyone else expects. It is to become the person you can deeply respect. Because when you respect yourself, you no longer need to earn your value through endless sacrifice. You no longer depend on constant approval to feel worthy. Your confidence no longer belongs to the opinions of strangers or the expectations of those around you. It comes from within, and that kind of confidence cannot be taken away. It becomes the quiet foundation on which you build a life that is truly your own. Chapter 12. A life beyond people-pleasing. Imagine waking up in the morning without immediately wondering who needs something from you. Imagine making decisions without constantly worrying about whether everyone will approve. Imagine saying yes because you genuinely want to, saying no without guilt, and speaking honestly without fear. For someone who has spent years living as a people-pleaser, this kind of life may seem impossible, but it isn't. It is the life waiting for you on the other side of fear. Throughout this journey, you've discovered that people-pleasing was never really about kindness. It was about safety. You believed that if everyone liked you, accepted you, or approved of your choices, then everything would be okay. You tried to earn love through sacrifice, avoid rejection through silence, and maintain peace by ignoring yourself. Now you know a different truth. Real peace does not come from making everyone else comfortable. It comes from no longer abandoning yourself. That realization changes everything. Many people worry that if they stop people-pleasing, they will become selfish. They imagine themselves becoming cold, uncaring, or insensitive. But there is a world of difference between selfishness and self-respect. A selfish person believes only their needs matter. A healthy person believes everyone's needs matter, including their own. Self-respect doesn't require you to stop caring about others. It simply asks you to stop caring for others at the expense of yourself. Think about the healthiest relationships in your life. They are probably not built on guilt or obligation. They are built on honesty, mutual respect, trust, and freedom. Neither person has to pretend. Neither person constantly sacrifices their identity to keep the relationship alive. Instead, both people are free to express themselves, disagree respectfully, and support one another without losing who they are. That is what genuine connection looks like. Imagine two friends planning a weekend together. One wants to spend the day hiking, while the other would rather relax at home. Instead of one person immediately giving up their preference out of guilt, they talk openly. They find a solution that respects both people, or they simply choose different activities without resentment. Neither friendship is threatened, neither person feels guilty, neither has to pretend. This is the quiet beauty of healthy relationships. They allow people to be different. One of the greatest gifts you can give yourself is permission to live according to your own values, instead of everyone else's expectations. There will always be people who disagree with your choices. Some may misunderstand your boundaries. Others may wish you were still the version of yourself who never said no. Let them. Not because you want to disappoint them, but because you understand something you didn't know before. You cannot build an authentic life while constantly performing for approval. Some people may need time to adjust to the healthier version of you. Those who genuinely care about you will gradually recognize that your boundaries are not acts of rejection. They are acts of honesty. They may even feel inspired to create healthier boundaries in their own lives. Others may resist. They may accuse you of changing. The truth is, you have changed. You've stopped believing that your worth depends on endless sacrifice, and that is something worth celebrating, not apologizing for. As you continue moving forward, remember that growth is rarely perfect. There will still be days when old habits return. You may catch yourself saying yes too quickly. You may feel guilty after setting a boundary. You may replay a conversation in your mind, wondering whether someone is upset with you. That doesn't mean you've failed. It means you're human. Healing is not a straight line. It is a series of choices made again and again. Every time you notice an old pattern and choose a healthier response, you strengthen a new way of living. Be patient with yourself. The habits you've carried were built over many years. They will not disappear overnight. Treat yourself with the same compassion you've always offered everyone else. Celebrate progress instead of demanding perfection. There is another important truth that deserves to be remembered. You were never responsible for making everyone happy. Every person carries their own dreams, struggles, disappointments, and emotions. You can support people, you can encourage them, you can love them deeply, but you cannot live their lives for them, and they cannot live yours. Your responsibility is to live with honesty, kindness, integrity, and courage. The rest belongs to life. Imagine yourself several years from now. You walk into a room without wondering how to become the version everyone will like most. You simply arrive as yourself. When someone asks for your time, you consider your own needs before answering. When you disagree, you express your opinion respectfully instead of remaining silent. When you make a mistake, you take responsibility without believing you are unworthy. When someone is disappointed, you listen with empathy without abandoning your own values. Notice what has changed. You are still kind. You are still generous. You are still compassionate. But now your kindness comes from freedom instead of fear. That changes everything. People will begin trusting your yes because they know it is sincere. They will respect your boundaries because they are communicated with honesty. Most importantly, you will begin trusting yourself. That trust becomes the foundation of every healthy relationship you build from this moment forward. As this audiobook comes to an end, remember that breaking free from people-pleasing is not about becoming someone new. It is about returning to the person you were before fear convinced you that love had to be earned. You are always worthy. You are always enough. You never needed to become perfect to deserve respect. You never needed to sacrifice your identity to deserve love. The voice you've rediscovered, the boundaries you've learned to set, the confidence you've begun to build, they have always existed within you. Now they simply have room to grow. From this day forward, let your decisions be guided by your values instead of your fears. Let your relationships be built on honesty instead of performance. Let your kindness be generous but never self-destructive. Let your compassion include yourself. And when you are faced with the choice between abandoning yourself to keep everyone else comfortable or honoring the person you are becoming, choose yourself, not because you matter more than anyone else, but because you matter too. That simple truth has the power to change the rest of your life. The journey beyond people-pleasing is not the end of kindness. It is the beginning of freedom, and freedom is where your real life finally begins. As we reach the end of this audiobook, remember that this is not the end of your journey. It is the beginning of a new way of living. For years you may have believed that your value depended on how much you could do for others, how often you said yes, or how successfully you avoided disappointing people. But today you know a different truth. Your worth has never been something you had to earn. It has always been a part of who you are. There will still be moments when old habits return. You may feel guilty for setting a boundary. You may hesitate before saying no. You may catch yourself seeking approval from others. Don't see these moments as failures. See them as opportunities to practice everything you've learned. Growth isn't about becoming perfect. It's about choosing yourself a little more each day. Remember, you can be kind without being controlled. You can be compassionate without sacrificing your peace. You can love others deeply without losing yourself in the process. The strongest relationships are not built on endless people-pleasing, but on honesty, mutual respect, and authenticity. From this moment forward, let your decisions be guided by your values instead of your fears. Speak your truth with kindness. Protect your peace without guilt. Trust your instincts, and never apologize for taking up space in your own life. The world doesn't need another person pretending to be everything for everyone. It needs someone who has the courage to be genuine. So walk forward with confidence, honor your voice, respect your boundaries, choose yourself not because you matter more than anyone else, but because you matter too. And the day you truly believe that is the day you stop living for others and finally begin living for yourself.